Hi, this is Robert Scheer with another edition of Scheer Intelligence, where the intelligence goes to my guest. And this is someone I've had before, Dr. Nolan Higdon. And he has, among other things, he teaches at UC Santa Cruz and he has a great website, the Gaslight Gazette. But he's been doing a whole file on the Epstein scandal, the Epstein ledger, and decoding Epstein is the title of an article that we have now up on ScheerPost. And I can't think of a bigger story. To me, this is like Caligula. It's going to define the last stage of the American empire, and because it's nonpartisan, because or both partisan, and because of the wealth, the power, what it means for the culture. But I'm gonna let you gonna spill that all out. But I just, not for voyeuristic reasons, because that clearly can drive the news cycle, and spectacle, yes. But I just think it shows what the I don't know what the late stage capitalist male hegemony and Silicon Valley bros whole thing really is about. It is our culture. But you tell me.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of what we found here in the so-called Epstein files. For decades, those of us who've been critical of power have been sort of lampooned. People would say it's not like all these wealthy people collude together, or all these wealthy people, plan the financial and political processes that we all experience. But these documents really reveal something different. Some of the people in the highest echelons of power in government and finance across the globe, they do communicate. They do have these shared interests. They do plan and coordinate together. And Jeffrey Epstein seems to be or was a central part of what was going on there. So I think we got a really interesting peek behind the curtain. And to your point about kind of what we found for generations, I think one of the most kind of glaring things that we've seen thus far, in addition to how far spread this is, right? This is in finance, this is in academia, this is in government, this is in international law, this is in industry. But in addition to that, it's interesting to see how other countries besides the United States are reacting by trying to hold people accountable for participating in these events. But in the US, we just kind of thrown our hands up and said, well, there's some bad actors, there's nothing we can do. I think that also speaks volumes.
Oh, I don't think that is the reaction now. I think this is the gift that's not going to stop giving, in the sense of enlightening us to how who are these people? Who are they? Why don't we have adults watching the store? And we don't even have the traditional restraints of bourgeois society of that the rock. I mean, I profiled Nelson Rockefeller. He had his own little scandal, but it actually was one on one and sufficiently adult, and it was treated as a scandal, and he paid the price for it. The idea that they could actually go on something called the Lolita Express in their own language, that they knew that this is depravity. This is not a question of sexual freedom. This is rape. It's grotesque, and the idea, and all of them. I mean, whatever they specifically did, the idea of Bill Clinton, being in a hot tub, or by the way, Chomsky. I don't want to pick on Chomsky, but for God's sake, though, after the guy is now publicly identified as a menace to youth, you're right, and to women, uh, you still go to him for advice about anything. I mean, tell us more about what you find in these files, because now everybody's pouring through it, but you've spent time on it. Tell me about your project, what you want to bring to it, and
Well,
yeah.
yeah, one of the things I do on the Gaslight Gazette is I try and give people as much factual information as possible in the sea of falsehoods. And one of the things that's happening right now, especially on social media, is there's a lot of fake images and fake documents being posted everywhere. And so I wanted to create kind of a place you could go where you could read about these things and click directly on the documents that pertain to them. And
Okay, that place, by the way, that's
nolanhigdon.substack.com, and you can look at the Epstein ledger as the most recent one, but you can look at all my Epstein work at the Decoding Epstein document as well.
okay.
Um, But within those, documents, and picking up on what you said about Chomsky, a lot of the people I think who are getting in trouble necessarily didn't do anything illegal, but they lied about their relationship with Epstein. So Chomsky said it was like one meeting. Now we found out it's a much longer, deeper relationship. Secretary Lutnick, same thing. He said he was disgusted and only met Epstein once. We now know it's much longer relationship. Elon Musk said he was disgusted by Epstein, refused invitations. We now know that Musk was begging for invitations and at least seemed to indicate he gave Epstein a tour of SpaceX. So a lot of these people have just straight lied in the public, and their lying is really what I think continues to fuel what you were talking about earlier, the public's interest. And I think it's also important to note there's still 3 million more DOJ files that are known. There could be more. There's all the financial records, which we still have never seen, and the Epstein estate also has a lot of files as well. So we're only getting kind of a small peek behind the curtain of exactly what Epstein was involved in here.
But let's talk about these people because, one of them, for instance, Henry Rosofsky, who was the dean at Harvard and really opened the door to Epstein, right? And cooperate. And again, I don't know what he did particularly and so forth, but he was associating with him after he was identified. Happened to be the department chair of economics when I was a graduate student at UC Berkeley. And I had great respect for this guy, and all I kept thinking, and then I interviewed him for some stories I did for the LA Times. I was thinking, wait a minute, are you so out of control, or was it the money? He could support different projects or something, or is this an old boy degenerate club or something? I just can't. It's hard. Or take someone like Lawrence Summers, who, I think is a thoroughly loathsome character in terms of the banking scandal which he presided over and robbing people of their homes. It's not legal robbery because he got the law changed, so all these liars loans and everything were made legal. I can't accuse him of breaking the law since he got to make the law in ways that ended up really hurting a lot of people. But what is he doing here? Why does he think he can get away with it? He was a married guy going, to this Epstein. What is it? And it can't be just that he gave out grant money, which he clearly did. He wasn't that wealthy. I gather his fortune was a mere 600 million. We're talking about other people who are flirting with being trillionaires. So, I mean, put us in that context. And it's such a wide group. I mean, Bill Gates, whatever they specifically did, why did they permit themselves, or not only permit, why were they excited to be in this network? How did they find this guy so exciting? And
Yeah,
his
and this is one of the
partner in crime, Ghislaine, whatever her name is.
Oh,
Yes.
Ghislaine Maxwell. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting parts of the story. So in the case of Larry Summers, you have him calling Epstein his wingman while he's trying to basically pressure this what appears to be a graduate student on his campus into a romantic relationship with him, he being Summers. And Summers also is saying disparaging things about women. I think for those people on the left, I think one of the best emails was that Summers was bemoaning how his own children were Bernie Sanders supporters in 2016, and that was driving him nuts. But your question about Epstein, this is why I think it's important to remember that the sex crime, sex trafficking, and predilection are part of the story, but they're not the entire story. So Epstein's involved with people at academia, including a lot of people at Harvard and MIT. He's also involved a lot of people in the intelligence community, a lot of people in industry. And the news media has really tried to.
And the Israeli secret
Oh
service.
yeah, from Mossad and Ehud Barak, absolutely. And the news media has largely tried to avoid putting all these together. They've made these claims like, well, Epstein was really wealthy. Like you said, he wasn't that wealthy. They've also said, well, it was really intelligent. He was just a guy who was interested in things. If you really look at the way the guy writes, he doesn't strike me as that intelligent. As you read through his emails as well. And so what you start to get is he's kind of a middleman for a multitude of activities. We see him trying to insinuate that he wants to blackmail people, such as Bill Gates. We see him trying to neutralize whistleblowers against business interests on behalf of supposedly Russians in New York City in one email. We also see him trying to connect people from different intelligence agencies, such as Mossad and U.S. intelligence. So his connect he seems to be a middleman for a multitude of different activities, and sex crimes are part of that. And back to what I said earlier, when the documents were released, one of the reasons why the government has said some documents are not released is because they said they're not going to release documents related to torture. That seems to indicate there are documents that involve torture, which begs the question of what those are about as well.
That is, I hadn't noticed that. Tell me more. I mean, if you know anything more about what does that mean? You're not going to release documents connecting this criminal, sex criminal, but with torture? But
Yeah, we don't know much of what they're hiding, but there are some indications in the documents. So there's one email um, with Jeffrey Epstein and an anonymous person talking about torturing a young girl. There's another one where Epstein asks an anonymous person about whether or not they did torture a girl. And apparently there were some videos given to Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein from a source that he seemed to indicate were a form of torture that not even he could handle, and he demanded no more videos. But that's really all that's known from the files because they're so redacted, and we don't know a lot of people involved.
so how are you proceeding? Because like there's this now feeding frenzy, with all of these documents. And is it being managed? Is it being manipulated? How much has been blackened out? How much is deliberately? They've obviously made a lot of mistakes. Or whether they were intentional or not, to reveal the names of victims. That's the big focus now. In fact, there are people in court. The lawyers, a couple of lawyers in court now, trying to get the thing held up because to protect the victims. But give us the scope of it. I mean, for people who haven't dropped everything else to go look into that, what would you say at this point are the most important revelations?
Well, I think number one is the second act of Jeffrey Epstein. That is after he took that plea deal in the early 2000s for the accusation he had committed sex crimes, the so called sweetheart deal. We've now seen the prosecuting federal attorney Alex Acosta's memo on that, and Acosta had way more evidence. He was very clearly had enough evidence to put Epstein away. And still gave Epstein this sweetheart deal where Epstein was able to walk by becoming a registered sex offender. Acosta reportedly told a reporter back then that he was told by the federal government that Epstein is intelligence, keep your hands off it. Acosta waited until 2025 to now deny that. But it's very clear, and all the legal observers I've talked to have said that there was plenty of evidence at the time in 2007 to put Epstein away. So all the crimes that emerge after that time period really have to be owned in part by the federal government. So I think that's one major finding. Another major finding is about our president of the United States right now, Donald Trump. For some reason, in 2025, someone in the government, and this is Trump's second term government, put together all or some of the accusations in the Epstein files against Donald Trump. They put them in one spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet was released, but it's highly redacted. And it does show all the accusation, or sorry, I shouldn't say all, some of the accusations against Donald Trump made by uh, accusers who claimed Trump, among other things, like forced them into oral sex, forcibly raped them, had security guards threatening them, was aware of sex crimes at his properties. In all cases that are unredacted, the government concluded that the claims were not well supported, that they couldn't find evidence they were true. But there's a lot of redactions in those files, and we haven't seen, a full case study on a lot of those. So I think that's an interesting find. And then the last interesting find I really thought was interesting is they had a confidential human source, the federal government did, that seemed to indicate they believed, and we don't really know how they knew this, but they were a confidential human source, seemed to think that Alan Dershowitz, Jeffrey Epstein, Sheldon Adelson, Ghislaine Maxwell were all connected at some level to the Israeli intelligence Mossad. And they talk extensively about that in one of the documents that is released. And that's supported by other documents, such as Epstein's close relationship with the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who also was in control of Israeli intelligence in the early to mid 1980s. So to me, those are kind of three of the big findings in terms of like the political and power implications.
Let me ask you about what I see as a bigger finding of the papers overall is where are we as a culture? where are we as a way of life, as a system? And the list of people who looked the other way, at the least, even if they didn't participate in all the specific, we have to remind people we're actually talking about the exploitation of some of the most vulnerable people in a society. Basically, people who didn't have a lot of money, some of whom were legally underage and are supposed to be protected at every turn from this kind of exploitation. Everybody should be protected from exploitation, but they're in a recognized group that that is illegal to take advantage of. There was a decadence, a deep decadence to
Mhm.
this. What, and I do think it'll stick. It will be like in the fall of the Roman Empire. It will be like Caligula in the sense that the decadence actually becomes the story, because these people are constantly telling us they're saving the world, right? Whether it's Bill Clinton, whether it's Elon Musk. I mean, they're all Lawrence Summers, by the way, who's the person who said women can't be scientists because they're not equipped that way. But nonetheless, in their activity, when after all, Secretary of Treasury, they say they're helping the world. They're pushing democracy. They're pushing. Many of them said they're pushing women's rights and so forth. And it turns out they were totally depraved in their, at the very least, their tolerance for this guy after after charges had been revealed in many cases. They're this. I like you because you also have an academic hat, right? What is your doctorate in?
I'm at media education.
Okay, so what does this really you know tell us about where we are as a culture? Because this is not a couple of random bad apples or something like that. This is the ruling circle, the ruling, right? This is the, if you put together the names that have come up prominently in this, and there's some of their foreign counterparts, but for the United States, it's as close as you get to this new scientific internet high tech elite that is running the whole show, and politically goes the whole gamut from Democrats to Republicans, and even a few idealistic leftists, the one at least thrown in there that you mentioned. So how do you react in that way as a scholar?
Well, in that way, and I think you just spoke to this. This built over time. I mean, the certainly since the 1970s, the ethos in this country has been less of a focus on democracy and the common good, and more of a focus on capitalism and individual pursuits of wealth. A very kind of hedonistic lifestyle. But the system, capitalism, of course, benefits the few at the expense of the many. In addition to treating, these women like sex objects, which is very clear throughout all of the documents. These financial elites are also like trading secrets, and it shows this kind of two-tier system. Folks will remember like the Robinhood app scandal from a couple of years ago, where average people basically colluded to fix a stock, and the Robinhood app shut them down. All they were doing is what financial elites do every day. And just collude to fix the stock market. But the system's okay for the wealthy and not for the poor. To your point about where this leads us as a culture, I think I see kind of two roads here. One is it deepens the skepticism of institutions because all of our major institutions are implicated here, whether it be education or government, law enforcement, industry, news media. All of them are implicated in these files. And it either contributes to a kind of deep skepticism that leads to dark cynicism, or it can be an opportunity to rebuild these institutions and rethink these systems. And I hope that we go with the latter on that. The reason being, for the last 40 or 50 years, the ethos has really been like, well, what's good for capital, what's good for industry is good for the people. And if you dared to say something like, well, maybe we should, put a cap on money, tax the billionaires, they'd be like, what, you want to punish the wealthy? It's no, it's in a
Oh,
capitalist
worse
system.
than what you want to punish the wealthy. You want to publish the creators of wealth.
Yeah, oh
You
yeah, the
want to publish
creators,
the
job
people who are
creators.
leading to a. No, no, really, we have to be clear about this.
Yeah.
The claim, and by the way, Bill Clinton is the one who presided over the deregulation of the
Mhm.
whole internet and the new high tech, right? And he also and the deregulation of Wall Street and ushered it in this whole period. And
Mhm.
Lawrence Summers, the guy conniving with Epstein, after all, was the main architect after Robert Rubin was Clinton's first Treasury Secretary. Lawrence Summers comes in there and he destroys any of the New Deal regulations, and then, of course, is rewarded by being head of Harvard, and also at the same time is making a lot of money from, I think it was the D. E. Shaw company on Wall Street. So these people are totally into the money, the culture, and you can't just say, well, you can have a progressive movement now and we'll contain it. It seems to me, it's dominant.
Hmm.
It's not going to concede power, and you see it today. Jeff Bezos is basically shutting down the Washington Post, one of the truly legend. You're a communications professor. One of the really legendary, important papers. They just fire everybody. You don't even need sports anymore. You don't need to cover this. You don't need to cover that, and so forth. So their power in every area. I mean, think of Bill Gates. His power. I mean, he controls much of farmland in America. So these people are not going anywhere. They're not giving up their power, and they have us by the throat. Let's be clear about it. And you can't divide them. It's not all Trump, right? Trump seems to be not the most enthusiastic participant in this, and he can actually make the argument. He laid off it after a while and saw the guy was going to be trouble. It's so spread between the most idealistic so-called liberals, and the most right-wing, supposedly church-going, religious right-wingers. It's you have to really ask whether it is a diseased culture. That was the question raised about Rome. Power, absolute power, corrupting absolutely. And is this really just a fundamentally corrupted culture and baked into late stage capitalism?
Yeah, and that power by having us by the throat is what I was getting at. Is it's not an argument about quote unquote punishing creators or punishing wealth. In a capitalist society, money is power. We shouldn't allow billionaires to consolidate that power. I think that is the major issue. But I want to pick up on another thread you said there because it's really important, which is the kind of naked exploitation and extraction of wealth that these folks engage in would largely not be accepted, and so it has to be coded in altruistic reasons, and that's why you have like folks like Bill Gates trying to posture themselves as doing good for the world, or Jeff Bezos caring about democracy, or Larry Summers and the Democrats like finger wagging that they're against racism and against sexism and they're the virtue hoarders. But reality is different. That was all just fake posturing and propaganda, and the culture kind of develops in a way where people have faith in like these idealistic, seemingly liberals on the left who are really just wealthy individuals who are using that language to justify their power and wealth. And on the right, it's folks who code themselves in language of like religion and common people and working people, and they're again doing the same thing. So part of that kind of culture, I think, is breaking the cultural control these elites have over the media, the information, the news we get. They dictate a lot of that, and audiences come to internalize that. They really believe that they're choosing between an idealistic liberal on one side or like the great Christian on the other. When both the Epstein files reveal both these sides are playing for the same team, they just have different rhetoric to try and manipulate people.
Right. And for the people on the Democratic side, I won't even use the word liberal, but like Lawrence Summers, even though he tipped his hand, by putting down the possible role or need to make a greater opportunity for women in the sciences, but still the mask, and it was Bill Clinton's mask, is of course being very concerned about women and girls, and their place in the world and standing against, and this is also on the Republic side part of the whole anti-Islam and the war on terror is all these evil people out there that have this very oppressive view. And what I want to get at is the lasting scope of this, because I don't think you get PR people to help you manage this. I think, and you are much more familiar with the files than I am. Uh, and I'd like to, by the way, to come back to you on in other weeks as
For
you
sure.
keep learning more about it, because I think you're really probably the most astute observer, or at least certainly one of them that we have right now on this whole business. But it seems to me that the more we learn about it, the more we recognize that the system cannot be marginally reformed. There's something fundamental, beginning with the role of money in politics, of course, that these people can actually control the action. And whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you have to appeal to them. I mean, the list of the perps here are people who actually could get you a lot of money or at least knew how to get money. And so I don't think, yes, we could think there will be some outcry, but these people are not giving up. They're not really even showing very much remorse. They're showing inconvenience of this truth, clearly. I was not there, or I didn't mean it, or I didn't think, but the fact is, what I like about your writing on this so far is that it goes to the systemic issues, that this corruption is not accidental. It's baked into the whole model of the modern pirate that we're celebrating. They, first of all, were allowed by law to have a monopoly position that was thought, going back to Adam Smith, to be in contradiction to the virtues of capitalism. That all went away. Really, people don't understand, I don't think, that with the coming of the internet, there was this bargain with the devil that they needed monopoly power and vertical integration, right? So they would have the money to do all these wonderful things. They also needed government money. This was never a free market experiment. The internet was designed by the defense apparatus and for war making, and uh, companies like Incutel, from the CIA, investing in companies like Palantir from the very beginning. Google as well, DARPA's connection. So there's always been a fantasy, but the fantasy has been that capitalism in a monopolistic cartel manifestation, the very thing the American Revolution was opposed to in terms of the British Tea Company and everything, that was consistent with enlightenment. Not just a good economy, but an enlightened economy. It would make us more productive. It would deal with problems of racism and gender exploitation. And here we have this visible evidence that it's not only not getting to a progressive outcome, it actually has incorporated the most evil aspects of gender discrimination, exploitation, rape. This is the rape of a society.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, and I think that's an important part of history too. Like, ironically, the current system was built upon those in government arguing cynicism about public control over aspects of our lives, like the economy. Right? This is really Reagan-esque, that government is the problem, but of course, what you're talking about is a government of, by, and for the people. What emerged in the post 1970s, certainly in the so-called Reagan Revolution, is you end up with capital having the power, and the government of, by, and for the people is really a choice between who capital gives you. It's, is it the billionaires supporting, Kamala Harris, or is it the billionaires supporting Trump? And I think that was the pivotal shift. And you're right about also the ways in which global capital has totally changed the game. They not only have influence over domestic politics here, but globally as well, and that affects the way the United States see things. And that becomes really clear in the Epstein files. Like, Epstein is informing US lawmakers about their perspectives on how international policy is going to affect corporations. It's that kind of pulling of the strings that ends up dictating domestic policy. And that's why we've had, problems we talk endlessly about in this country, like poverty or poor performing schools, systemic things like racism and sexism. They're never dealt with because we're always engaged in some like ideological global conquest. And you can see a lot of that tied to global capital in these files.
Well, I've talked too much, so I can go longer if you got the time. But let's just take a few more minutes. Is there anything I left out that so far? Like I say, I don't know if you're in agreement with me, but that you will come back again to do this, because I'd love to have you be one of the go-to people that we talk about. And also, could you mention the spelling of the website so that people actually can go right to you? They don't need me as in the middle here. Uh,
Yeah, it's at Nolan, Nolan, Higdon, Hig as in good, D as in David On, .substack.com. And the latest release is the Epstein Ledger, which goes through the 3 million or so files that have been released this month. And it goes back to the files released in December as well. And of course, yeah, I'll come back anytime to be on here. Um, I think another aspect we really haven't talked about much that's also interesting, and this goes back to a couple of releases ago, but this release as well. Uh, Epstein was connected to a lot of people in the press, and a lot of people in the press trusted Epstein. And one of the file, or one of the communications that was released, was between Michael Wolff, who we'll call him a journalist. He was working with Epstein, and at the time, the two of them really were trying to collude to see what information Epstein had that Michael Wolff could get out into the public to hurt Trump's reputation. Now, again, we haven't seen all the files, so I wonder who else's reputation Epstein went after, and maybe what other attempts they made on Trump's public profile. But regardless of how you feel about Trump, just the idea of those in the press working with people in this way for political ends, not reporting the facts, I think is an illustrative problem that goes back, decades. You can look at Operation Mockingbird and things like that. But this and Michael Wolff's not the only one, but it demonstrates how much kind of the press is managed in a lot of these cases as well. And I know from being a source in a lot of legacy media, they kind of tell you that they depend on the expert to kind of fill in the gaps. So whatever you say in your interview with a journalist, what the journalist reports. Well, a lot of these reporters, especially in big corporate media, they depend on the experts from the political class and the financial class. So the very people who are in this same circle dictate a lot of the narratives. And again, Epstein's right there in the middle. So I think news media also has to think a lot about diversity, not just in the diversity we see, but also the diversity of thoughts and connections to improve its First Amendment protections as well.
Well, first of all, there is no news media in the traditional sense. And what
Yeah.
happened today with the Washington Post laying off, a good chunk of its newsroom with clearly more cuts to come. The model is broken. Certainly, print is over, but and for better or worse, there's some good things about. Look, I'm talking to you. We're doing it over a different technology. Now they've been able to control, and you're a professor in this area. They're able clearly to control Google traffic, Google News, anything. You don't get it to websites that say something different. So it's a whole different internet right now. But still, astute readers can go to different sources to find a different narrative. But the thing, what I want to get at is what really motivates these people. We got a few more minutes, but why were they going after Trump? I mean, is it all just ego and power? Or I mean, it's so hard to understand the politics. Strange bedfellows. And literally, what is Bill Clinton doing in bed with Donald Trump is really a way of looking at this story. Why are they, hanging around with this guy? Usually, you can tell a lot from people's lives who they're hanging out with, who they like being with, who are they comfortable with. So, this list of people who are comfortable with Jeffrey Epstein, who clearly is in a basic way so unappealing. I mean, really, what he's doing, what he's inviting you to. I mean, what could be appealing about going to something you're referring to as the Lolita Express? I mean, what do you say to yourself? Don't you feel corrupt? Don't you feel creepy about it? Did Bill Clinton feel creepy being in that hot tub? But so what brings these people together is just that they say we run the world, that we have power, you know. But then why did they go after Trump in that particular case?
It's a good question, and it does appear obviously their wealth and power intersect, and I guess I mean most of your listeners will definitely know this, but you got to remember Trump in like the 1990s was more like the neoliberal corporatist. He was more like a Clintonite than kind of the image he has now. I mean, he fits a lot better into that class if you look through like a 1990s lens than sort of the Trump we have today. And also remember, like a lot of these people are inspired by the 1980s. That the true rebels were the ones who went out and made money. That kind of yuppie culture, greed is good, Gordon Gekko. That was all inspiring to that corporatist generation. But at the same time, within that social circle, there's a lot of indications from a lot of writing and reporting that the Trump sort of felt like he was kind of treated like almost like a buffoon in that circle. That he didn't have that same kind of like intellectual pedigree or accomplishments. He was a interesting figure, maybe more so for laughs than treated with kind of the respect like someone a Bill Clinton would get. And I think he brought a lot of that to the White House. He started to have some resentment against some of these folks on a personal level when he gets in there, and you can see how desperate he is to kind of consolidate their loyalty when he gets in there. All he wants is loyalty from these people in industry and people in academia. He seems to be someone who wants that. And I think Epstein, and you see Michael Wolff, Bannon, all these folks saw Trump as a buffoon. I mean, they're making fun of him behind the scenes. Like, you could take a lot of things they're saying about Trump and put it in like liberal social media chat feeds. It's almost the same thing. And I think Trump at some level internalized that. Now, whether or not that comes from some falling out, there's been so many different stories about the how the Epstein Trump relationship broke down and when it did. We don't really know. But what does become clear is a lot of people in that circle kind of had a buffoonish image of Trump. There's not a lot of evidence of him really being taken seriously by those folks.
Yeah, until he wiped out the whole Republican opposition in that debate and pointed out most tellingly that he'd given money to all of the candidates, including Jeb Bush, and that won the debate. But just in wrapping this up, I think what people should think about is just a basic question you have to always ask about power. Who are these people? It's a question, unfortunately, a lot of people in Germany didn't ask about the ruling circles that ended up giving them Hitler. How does this happen? Who are these people? And you have this now. Our country has been brought to a really dangerous moment, and with it, of course, the world. Since when we sneeze, the rest of the world gets pneumonia. And you really look, who are the heroes? I mean, I interviewed Bill Gates once, and I thought he was a pretty good guy. And he told me he was going to give away all of his money before he died. And his father was very idealistic, and his wife was very no longer his wife. But I drank the Kool Aid lots of times. I interviewed Bill Clinton, and before he was president, and thought this guy had some good values and so forth. And what these tapes reveal is we really don't know these people. We just don't. We don't know what all that wealth and connection with wealth and power, and it's the destruction of the human soul, nothing less. You just can't look the other way. What these people participated in, whether they did it directly or as bystanders or knew about it or winked or whatever, it's as ugly as it gets. It's as ugly as it gets. It's the rank exploitation, rape, attack on other human beings and their vulnerability, exploiting them in the most extreme way, and the idea that they somehow could just still go to conferences and everything and talk about saving humanity, right? Bill Clinton's going to save the world's poor, save women everywhere. It's grotesque. I'm going to tie this up now a neat 40 minutes, so I'm going to give you the last 2 minutes. Go ahead.
No, I think that's well said, and I think that's why when I was talking earlier about whether or not we go down a totally cynical path or create some alternative, there's going to be need to be accountability. This can't be Democrats wanting to hold Trump accountable and Republicans wanting to hold the Clintons accountable. It needs to be a larger class discussion. I think we've seen some good signs. Larry Summers has been shamed out of public life. The Clintons apparently are now going to testify in front of Congress publicly, and young Democrats didn't protect them. But it needs to be much more. Where there can be legal charges, we need to see those. And then I think reform is a dirty word. I think a lot of these agencies need to be broken up, rebuilt if necessary. But things like the Central Intelligence Agency are just toxic. How many more decades of evidence do we need? And Epstein's clearly a part of that as well. So I think those kind of fundamental changes, if those occur, that'll put the United States on the right path. But if we continue down this hyper partisan finger pointing, pull out this character, that character, instead of looking at the holistic picture, this problem is just going to persist.
Yeah, and then let me throw in my own brief editorial. If we let ourselves be co-opted by these people, and one way is by journalists being given that interview. I'm a recipient of those interviews. I know it can advance your career. I know you can get giddy with the access. Access journalism has been the death of journalism, and it allows PR people to control it on behalf of the people of power and wealth. So, I want to hats off to you for doing great work. And it's the Substack Nolan Higdon, and there's an O in the end because that's what I had trouble getting you this morning. And hopefully we can do this again on some regular basis because you're going to spend a lot of time reading this. I want to thank Joshua Scheer, who's the executive producer of this, because he's a big fan of yours. He lined this up, and I'm really thrilled that we were able to do it. So see you next time. Yeah.
See ya. Thank you so much.